As the NFL moves to dismiss players' lawsuit over penalties for cannabis medication use, saying that THC can cause injuries and alienation of fans. What? NFL and the Denver Broncos are asking a federal court to reject a player's lawsuit alleging discrimination over penalties he incurred due to positive THC tests from his prescribed use of a synthetic cannabinoid. A joint motion to dismiss filed with the U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado last week. League and team defended their marijuana policy for players, affirming it's their view that use of cannabis can lead to on-field injuries, poor job performance, and, quote, alienation of the fans. And they challenged the discrimination claims from Randy Gregory, who played for the Broncos before moving to the San Francisco 49ers. Gregory filed a suit in a state district court last month, arguing that NFL and Broncos violated the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act by penalizing him for using the FDA-approved cannabis medication dronabinol to treat anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and pain. The case was moved to the federal court earlier this month. Defendants responded by arguing that those claims are, quote, completely preempted by the Federal Labor Management Relations Act, and they said U.S. Supreme Court and Federal Circuit Court precedent on collective bargaining agreements demonstrate that plaintiffs' claim under the state law must be dismissed. Motion to dismiss also asserts that Gregory's allegation that the NFL and Broncos violated Colorado's anti-discrimination law falls flat because the statute doesn't expressly protect workers from being penalized over marijuana use, regardless of whether it's used for medical purposes in compliance with state law. The complaint says, quote, accordingly, even accepting plaintiff's allegations as true, the court should dismiss plaintiff's complaint in its entirety. The NFL and S Players Union agreed to end the practice of suspending players over marijuana or other drugs as part of a collective bargaining agreement in 2020. It has continued to fine players over positive THC tests. The first through third positive test, the fine is a half a week's salary. Fourth and each subsequent positive test is punishable by a fine equal to 3 weeks' salary. League and team defended the current policy, noting that it contains detailed requirements and protocols for testing all players, and makes clear that the use of substances prohibited by the policy, including specifically THC, can lead to on-the-field injuries, to the alienation of fans, to diminished job performance as an NFL player. After NFL rejected Gregory's request for an accommodation to use the synthetic THC medication in May 2023, he paid out $532,500 in penalties. NFL and the Broncos also pointed out in their motion to dismiss that part of the reason Gregory was denied an accommodation to use the THC medication was because it was prescribed for off-label use, as dronabinol was approved for the treatment of nausea and not social anxiety, PTSD, or pain. In sum, plaintiff plainly seeks to use this lawsuit to avoid discipline and preclude medical administrators from enforcing the express provisions of the NFL's collectively bargained policy, the filing says. Not only is it such a claim inextricably intertwined with the collective bargaining agreement and the policy, and thus preempted under Section 301 of the LMRA, it also fails a matter of law and must be dismissed. While it is taking this position in the lawsuit, NFL itself has committed significant funding to research into whether CBD can serve as an effective opioid alternative, and it's also explored the therapeutic potential of non-intoxicating cannabinoid for pain management and neuroprotection from concussions. Commissioner of the NFL and the league's players union previewed the funding plan in June 2022, emphasizing the strong interest amongst players and other stakeholders. The NFL-NFLPA committee also held 2 informational forums on CBD in 2020. While advocates have welcomed these changes, there has been criticism of World Anti-Doping Agency over its ongoing cannabis ban. Members of a panel within the agency said in an opinion piece last August that marijuana use by athletes violates, quote, spirit of the sport, unquote, making them unfit role models whose potential impairment could put others at risk. Advocates strongly urged WADA to enact a reform after U.S. runner Sha'Carri Richardson was banned from participating in the Olympics in 2021 due to a positive THC test. Following that suspension, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency that the international rules on marijuana, quote, must change, unquote. The White House and President Joe Biden himself signaled that it was time for new policies, and congressional lawmakers amplified that message. According to Forbes magazine, players are now required to undergo marijuana testing once a year at the start of training camp, even though marijuana use is still prohibited in the NFL. Travis Kelce is one of the most accomplished players in the NFL, but before his rise to stardom with the Chiefs, tight end lost an entire college season due to a drug-related suspension for smoking weed. Now, years later, Kelce suggests at least half, and perhaps even a clear majority, of all NFL players are using cannabis, same substance that got him in trouble. Kelce isn't the first notable name to suggest as much. Former tight end Martellus Bennett once proposed that 89% of NFL players use marijuana, and former running back Ricky Williams, whose career included multiple drug-related suspensions, suggested at least 80% of players did the same. A number of notable retired players, including Williams, Marshawn Lynch, Tiki Barber, and Calvin Johnson, have also invested in medical or recreational cannabis companies over the years. And of course, I'm wearing Ricky Williams brand Heisman. Pretty happy about Ricky moving forward in the cannabis business. I'm Todd Denkin with High 9 News. So should the NFL dismiss this lawsuit? Should they give him his money back? And should players be allowed to smoke weed?
The NFL should definitely dismiss this lawsuit. Now let me make sure that I understand this correctly. This lawsuit is not involving actual cannabis. This is actually involving a pharmaceutical drug that he was prescribed. Am I correct on that?
Dronabinol. Yeah,
Dronabinol.
Okay. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I know. What's he doing that? Why don't you just get some real weed?
Well, because it's prescribed. Because he wanted to be protected.
Exactly. He wants to be able to piss dirty and not.
But
not
that backfired, obviously.
I mean, this one is it's a very interesting case. If you know Randy Gregory, man, dude's a wild ass motherfucker.
Yeah,
he's a wild ass dude, and
go Broncos.
Yeah, I don't want to
now,
because he has very, very public bouts of issues with mental health. I don't want to dive too much into nothing that I can or cannot diagnose. But it's very interesting the stuff that's being brought up here, and I think the NFL has no choice but to publicly push back and try to dismiss this because it's going to open a whole new can of worms. All these other.
Well, this is actually an argument against the rescheduling because it's even the medicines that are accepted and widely used, the only things that are used globally are in fact ineffective, and they're still receiving the same results as if they would have just bought a sack of weed off their somebody. I know somebody has to have some good weed in Colorado.
No, they don't.
No matter what
one does.
No matter what
anybody has to have good weed in the NFL. Let's face it.
Shout out to Allgreen. Shout out to Denkin.
Weed in Colorado. They already have warning labels.
Now he started his crazy days in Colorado.
He's not.
Kyle Turley have a brand in Colorado.
Kyle Turley?
I think the funniest part about this is that the NFL is saying that using pot causes the alienation of fans. I think fans embrace right? I like people more when I find out they smoke weed.
The only reason they call
have you ever gone on Twitter and looked up the hashtag Bills Mafia? See the shit that goes down in the parking lots of
and here's the thing, until the NFL
alienating fans. Have you ever been to a Niners a Raiders game?
No, a Raider game. Raider game. The largest smokeout ever at halftime. Largest smokeout anywhere ever at halftime.
Until the NFL bans serving beer in a stadium, this is a simple double standard. If they talk about the negative effect or the message that it sends to fans, most people I've seen at stadiums are not on their best behavior and are definitely under the influence of alcohol. So let's just keep it simple and have a single standard.
Let's go back to this alienation.
It's about the money. They can't vend the cannabis yet. So until they can sell you an eighth for $120,
let's go.
No one's going to pass it down the line, like the peanuts.
Todd, the only reason why alienation even comes up in this whole story and them having a reason is because they are alienating the consumers of cannabis cannabis by chasing them with police, chasing them with security, and all of this other things, and not offering a place for consumption at their stadiums.
That's right.
Agreed.
That's right.
Agreed.
Alienation for the Raider Nation. You know?
Yes. And on that, we're going to go to a commercial. We're going to be right back.
Go Broncos.
Mm-hmm.